Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. Wow, I am super excited today. I know I say that every episode, but I mean it. I mean, I really mean it, that I am super excited today because there is a guest who is, I don't even know if we can call her a guest because she's actually going to become 50% of the podcast. So this new guest, this is a new addition for 2023. I am bringing somebody on. So we do two, as you know, if you listen to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast, you know that I do 2 episodes a month. And that may not seem like a lot, but it is. It's sufficient for what we do here. And so one of those episodes every month that we're going to do moving forward in this year is we're going to have somebody on by the name of Allison, or Aly, as we call her, Aly Sousa. Aly is a dear friend. She's family to me. It's a dear friend of mine. She has been on the podcast in the past. It's been a while, but I wanted to reintroduce Aly to the show because Aly is, I mean, how do we describe Aly? Aly, we're going to introduce her in a second, but Aly is somebody who's full of wisdom. She's here for liberation. She's done tremendous amount of work on herself, and she has a passion for people. She loves all people. She's a servant, but she's here to help the world heal. She's here to help the world up level and to take us where we're going as a planet, as a society, as a people. And she is full of wisdom, and the more you hear her and the more conversations we'll have, I know that you will see that as well. But Aly, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for including and inviting me. This is awesome.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I'd love for you, Aly, to just talk a little bit about your life and just who you are. And I know you're a California girl by nature, or by birth here, and you're born.
I was actually born in Florida. I've lived there very briefly, like a week. I was actually born in Naples, Florida. And ironically, right. I live on Naples Avenue in Redlands. Isn't that weird?
Super. That is really interesting.
Yes.
So I think these are signs of home, right? You're
yes, and synchronicity. Yeah.
Totally. And when I say home, I mean less about physical location, more about this is kind of where you came into your own, your own being, where you are now, there and on living in your house now, and this is kind of represented a whole chapter of your life where you've been growing and doing inner work for a number of years. But tell us a little bit about what was it like. So you're a twin, right? You were born in Florida, but you are a twin.
I am a twin. I have a twin brother, and he's 20 minutes older than me. We're very, very close. We've gone through seasons of, when you tell people you're a twin, they immediately want to know, are you guys really, really close? And I tell other people he was my womb mate. We've gone through seasons throughout our life. We're 57 years old, where we've been very, very close, and then not real close. And other times where we've lived pretty far apart, actually. But we have been in a season now of late where we are getting closer and closer and closer. And it's fun being a twin. I was the second born of the two of us, and my mom didn't know she was having twins. We were born in the 60s. So it was more than a shock for my mother. But yeah, it's fun. It's interesting being a twin.
So you, and people will realize this the more they get to know you, but I mean, there's a tremendously robust and developed spiritual life that you have. Was it always that way for you? What was it like? What was your spiritual life or your spiritual formation like growing up as a child?
That's an interesting question, Jamal. In terms of like religious constructs, the only time my mom said she baptized my brother and I as Lutherans, but I don't have any memory of going to church, Lutheran or otherwise, growing up. I can remember as a small child being very, now when I look back, I was very deeply spiritual from early in my life. And what I mean by that, like in my own little kid way, I would talk to God. I would pray. I had a sense of some kind of energetic vastness beyond me. And from early in elementary school, I remember I had a close friend, and her family was a Mormon family, a very large Mormon family. And I remember being very attracted to that. I think it was the family. They were very close. They did a lot of things together. They were very communal. And I remember being in her basement. I think I want to say it was like 9 or 10, and learning Bible stories on a felt board. And and I remember just liking that, and liking to learn about spiritual things. And then I had another friend. She was a large family. She came from a large family. I think she was one of 8. She was the baby. So her parents were a lot older than her. Her siblings were all grown and gone. She grew up like an only child, and they were devout Methodists. And I remember loving to go to church with her. She hated going to church. Her parents would require that she went to church, but they had this big farmhouse, and they would make home cooked meals, and we go to church together. And I just remember loving to listen to the pastor teach about God and all of that. And so I think from an early age, there was this sense. My dad told me years ago, my step adoptive dad says too, he said, you've always been kind of this old soul. And he described a time when he and my mother were in just this knockout, drag out fight. He said, I was about 5. And he described where he was sitting in the house, in the living room, in the chair and the furniture. And he said it was a really nasty, loud, raucous fight. And he fell into a chair into the living room. And he said, you came in to the living room and you planted yourself directly in front of me with your feet kind of splayed out and your hands on your hips. And he described me as giving him what for. And he said he sat there just in shock at like, how could this little know? He said, you nailed the exactness of what was going on at a deep, deep level between your mom and I. And wow. I just remember thinking, that is so interesting. Like, just, yeah. That
at 5 years old, you literally could see through the quote unquote BS of the struggle that your parents were going through in that moment, and you could call it out and see it clearly.
Yes.
And you confronted him on that.
Yeah. And he said his mouth was agape. He said his eyes were like deers in headlights. And he just said he said I was speechless. Like there was nothing I could really say other than like that, it's accurate what you're saying, but he was just shocked at 5 that I would be able to communicate at that level with him. So I don't know. I feel like I've become more present to that and owning it and less afraid of that as more of late, I would say, in the last several years.
And that's always been who you are, even at 5 years old, to be able to like help your dad see the bigger picture a little bit. That's what you were speaking into. Like, this is the root. This is where the conflict's coming from. So I love how that was always there. Like, you didn't have to learn that. No one had to train you or teach you how to be you. Like,
right.
I always tell people, it's like, to be you is effortless. It's all you've always been you. It's just a matter of discovering or reconnecting with the truest essence of who we are. But you don't have to learn how to be you. You already know. We have to unlearn how to be all the other things that we're not.
Totally. And that's much of my work has been in the last several years, has been that unknowing, that unlearning, the deconditioning. Yeah.
Totally. So let's talk about that, because you eventually became an evangelical Christian, right?
Yeah.
We're talking late teen years. And
actually, by the time when I was 14, so in ninth grade. Yeah. Okay. And steeped heavily from that moment on.
And became very devout evangelical Christian. Okay. So how would you describe your years as an evangelical? Looking back on it, how would you describe that period of your life?
Very devoted, very focused, progressively so. from the time I was 14. I mean, steeping in it. As I moved into adulthood, just more and more and more, like very studied. I mean, I never went to theology school per se, but I mean, that level of
But
focus.
very committed, very
Yes.
focused.
Very
Studying.
involved in ministry, study, teaching, mentoring.
Totally. How would you say your beliefs as a devout evangelical Christian affected you? How did it affect your life? What was your experience with that?
You know, that's a great question, Jamal. I mean, I think growing up, you know, there was no religious notions happening in my family of origin. I left home. I ran away from home when I was 17 because it was so toxic and had been. But in terms of religious stuff, there was not any of that I grew up in at all. So I think, but I grew up in a home that was very black and white, very right and wrong, high standards for morality. My mom was, you know, she would never say this of herself, but the projection of it was like, I am God, like I am the authority. My opinions matter. What I say goes, no holds barred. Like you need to submit to that. So I think the religious construct provided some of that. It provided some of the sameness and the familiarity of the right and wrong and the moral code, the guardrails, you know, the rules. I grew up in a very extremely authoritarian home, a lot of punishment, a lot of, you know, belts and switches and stuff like that, restrictions.
So a lot of fear.
A lot of fear. And subjugation, right? You know, punitive subjugation. So I think the religious construct provided similarity and sameness in that way, although I don't know that I was conscious of that. But what it added into that I didn't get in my home was the nurture, some of the nurturing components and the loving components and the inclusion and the community, the communal part of it. And I was starving for that.
Totally.
So it allowed for that. And just belonging in a deeper way, which I had not really experienced a sense of that in my family of origin.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's kind of a mixed bag, right? So in evangelical Christianity, growing up or converting and being a part of the church, there was sameness in what, as your home, as your, you know, what you grew up in with your family. And that sameness was some of the toxicity, right? The authoritarianism. Yes. So God was perceived as the divine dictator on high, right? That just demanded total obedience. Yeah. There was this system of morality, good and evil, kind of was, you know, fear of punishment if you stray too far, and
a system of conditional, like a sense of conditional types of love. So if you behave and you follow, and at home, if I did all my chores exactly as mom needed me to, I needed to be done by that, you know, there would be a greater possibility for a sense of her being at least happier. And that sense of rules where you're following in church, and you have this sense of, I'm closer to God because I followed the rules. I did what the Bible told me. I did what, you know, my teachers that are teaching me about the Bible, their interpretation of it are, you know, communicating. And so you had a sense of belonging, a greater sense, at least.
Totally. So there were toxic elements of control, manipulation, fear, but then the positive elements were that opportunity to belong, right? You could belong to a wider group of people, a tribe.
Yep.
Have a sense of community acceptance. And that's something you didn't
experience in my home. Mm-mm.
So that was kind of the carrot, so to speak.
Yes.
That led you into that entire sphere, right, of the evangelical Christianity.
And my type too, in terms of my personality type, it's interesting because I'm a twin. Like, I'm very, by my nature, like my desire is to comply and to get along, and which can have it can be a beautiful part of my construct, but it can also lend itself to people pleasing and staying and stuck in something that's toxic and not good for me too long, because I need and want approval of these supposed people that I've set up as experts or authority member, and the church did provide for that. Mm-hmm. So it allowed for me to have some measure of structure and sameness, but it did allow also for, I think I did experience loving kindness and graciousness and even unconditional love, I would say, in spots and fits and starts here and there.
Sure. Totally. And I think that's probably what kept you there for so
long,
but what's interesting to me is that even though there's a disposition of your tendencies tend to be people pleasing or whatever in that sense, even despite that, you at some point in your journey, which we haven't got to yet, you chose to challenge that entire tribal way of thinking, that entire, a lot of the belief systems that make up evangelical Christianity. You started to see through that and started to challenge that, which is to me very unlikely. If you were allowing those tendencies to govern you, the tendencies to people please, to not offend, but instead you chose to pursue a different path, which is to seek truth, even though it may not have resonated with the tribe or the community that you're a part of. So can you talk a little bit about when did you start to the buzzword here is deconstruct, right? People talk about deconstruction and deconstructing their belief system, but deconstruction, I always look at beliefs like this. I always say everybody has beliefs. Right? Beliefs are, their beliefs are basically just, the mind creates them to have a sense of certainty, have a sense of being, and beliefs are, some of them are better than others. Some of them are in alignment with truth, and some of them go against truth.
Right.
And I always say beliefs will work for you until they don't. And if they, it's like clothes, right? The clothes fit, and then at some point you outgrow them, right? And when you outgrow your clothes, you get new clothes.
Right.
So at some point you started to outgrow your beliefs.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What were some of the beginnings of that process of outgrowing your beliefs?
I would say the authority thing, that the was a big catalyzer for me, even way back. I mean, this is when the first church I belonged to, Christian church, back when I was like 19, 20 years old, which is going, I mean, literally almost, 40 years back now. And I started to become present to this kind of hyper authoritarian, hierarchical, something was very not resonant with, it was off. And so much so, it just built and built and built to the point where it was like we could no longer remain in the church. It completely fractured the relationship. We tried to maintain the relationship and the friendship even out having left, but they didn't want that. So, you have these experiences where you're like, really, what is our relationship built on then? That we believe the same thing. That's what it's about. Yeah. We all believe the same thing. We're part of the same tribe. And as soon as there's dissent of any kind, we can no longer have a friendship. So that began to repeat itself. We went to another church. That same type of thing broke down. We went to another church, same thing. Every single church, including our organic church thing, it became a problem. So the life partners thing became a catalyzing reason for why we were not going to be accepted any longer.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is you started to see that the unity that oftentimes, people experience in religious communities or groups is dependent upon sharing a shared set of beliefs, right?
Yes.
So in some ways, the unity, the sense of being family or being connected or being one, whatever language you want to put on it, is really it's very much, I would put it this way, that it's an illusion. It's built upon an illusion.
Yes.
Because the foundation of that connection is not solid.
No.
Meaning, and I would say beliefs are not solid. If you build your relationship with somebody else based upon a label of some sort, a belief of some sort, well, as soon as those beliefs change, they're like clothes.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh yeah, when I was 10, I wore this shirt or pair of pants or
Right.
shoes, right? I don't wear the same clothes as
No,
an adult
I've
because,
outgrown them.
I've outgrown them. So if your
Right.
relationships, and this is so key, this isn't just religion. Religion is a big area, but people do this in politics, right? People do this in lots of things. If your views shift or change or don't match up with what they used to be, typically, if your relationships were built upon sameness when it comes to
Yes.
these ways of looking at the world, well, then you're going to sense distance from that person. You're going to say,
Right.
oh, well, we just see the world a little bit different. And then, what happens is that sense of connection dissipates. And to me,
Right.
that's the illusion, because if we understand quantum mechanics or the fabric of reality, nothing is ever separate from each other, right?
No,
There is no such thing as separation.
no.
So we can really only experience connection to the degree that we've been liberated from the illusion of connection.
Of separation. Exactly.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that you started to see that, like, oh my goodness, my beliefs are changing and now I'm losing these relationships. And so really, what were they built on?
Right. And so I began to be in this repeated over and over again. So I became very present more and more and more of the incongruence of what is being fronted through this my chosen religion, in terms of the tradition of it all, even versus what I'm actually, my lived experiences. There was such an incompatibility between the two over and over and over again, where we just, each time we would leave, we would deconstruct more and more and more, only to be enticed back into it in a different milieu, a different venue, maybe it's a different set of people. It might even be a different denomination or non-denomination, right? But it was the same thing repeated, including in the parachurch organization that we were participating in.
Sure.
There's
a line of a song somewhere.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a line, I can't remember which song it is, but it says, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, or something like that. We just replace the dictators with dictators. And
and the language might even I remember even in involvement with organic church movement, where it's much smaller in a home, the verbiage might be changed, the language might be changed, but the energy at the core, at the energetic level, it was the same.
Yeah. Totally.
And, you at some point you internalize, like, okay, like,
So was this a challenge for you to go through this process? What was that? What did that do with your sense of reality? Like I would imagine your perception of even what or who God is completely went through this evolution. And how did that affect you? How did you deal with that?
I mean, it was very disruptive. It felt you're just questioning everything. Mm-hmm. It has this kind of very tenuous feeling constantly. You're not on any kind of solid ground at all. Nothing objective that you can grab a hold. But I mean, when I think of faith and trust, the essence of it at the level of energy, that is the way that it grows best, is in that kind of a climate where you no longer can cling to ideas or concepts or a system of belief. You have to go inward. You learn that it is not outside of you.
Totally. Well, what's interesting, I'm so glad you said that there's a construct. So somebody asked me not too long ago, they said, Jamal, do you still believe in God? And I said, no. I used to believe in God. I don't believe in God anymore. Of course, they were like, oh. And I said, I'm aware of God. But I don't believe, because belief is one of those things of the mind. Again, nothing wrong with belief, but belief is kind of like an educated guess. It's like it's a construct I put together. It's this idea of God, or I could say an idea of myself, right?
Yeah.
I no longer believe in myself. Like, do you believe in yourself? Like, no, why would I believe in myself? It's kind of ridiculous. I'm aware of myself.
Yeah.
And belief is something that you don't really know. It's a construct. It's almost an educated guess that your mind puts together this, like, for example, if I met 10 people that knew you. Let's say I never met you, and I met 10 people that did have experience with you, and they said, well, you got to meet Aly. She's amazing. First of all, she's a great hairdresser. She's super, she's really smart, inquisitive. She's well read. They could say all kinds of things, right? And after hearing that, I may form a belief. Well, I believe
about who Aly is.
About who Aly is.
Yeah.
And it could be true. It could be spot on.
Right.
But I don't know that to be true, because this is a construct.
Yes.
And if let's say my constructs can be validated or invalidated based upon experience. But like, for example, and it's kind of probably not the best example, but you have a dog, so we love Toby. Toby is, Allison and Dave have a dog named Toby, who's just precious and has such personality. And but if you were to say to Toby, if you were to just say, hey Toby, you're not a real dog. Like you act like you, I don't even know, you're not a real dog. Toby's not offended.
No.
In the least, because Toby has no. Now, obviously, because animals don't have the capability, but Toby does not have the ability to attach
exactly
to a construct of what it means to be a dog.
Yes.
So Toby's just being a dog.
Right.
Toby doesn't
just
need the idea of being a dog.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with God, right? We can get very attached to our construct of God. We can get very attached to our construct of self, of who I think I am.
Right.
And all of those things are they could be true concepts or false concepts, but none of them are actually who we are.
Mm-mm.
And so when I say, oh, I'm aware of God, or I'm aware of myself, that's not a construct or concept.
Mm-mm.
It's not a belief even. It's literally an experience.
Yes. Of the vastness that you are.
Yes. But it's, you literally have to drop the concepts to experience.
Yeah.
This is the catch-22. To the degree that you drop the concept of who you think you are,
will be
the degree to which
yeah.
you experience who you are. And it's the same thing with God, right? Because God's in the same place, right? Wherever we talk about self, I mean, you can't,
right.
That's where God is. But what to experience the reality of God, this is not belief. So therefore, you don't have to attach to a belief. You don't have to relate around a belief. You can't get offended if someone challenges your belief.
Right.
If you don't have attachment to them. Nothing can change experience, however, when you begin to become aware and experience yourself.
Yes.
It needs no defense.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Like, and there's no sense of defending or protecting.
Mm-mm.
or then, it's just, this is just experience. And when you experience these realities of self, of God, this is where liberation is found, because
totally. And the experience is the way really that we integrate the consciousness, the awareness, of isness, of God, of the source. It's through this experience of God. And in the constructs of my religion, I felt like there was so much emphasis on knowing definitively, belief. It disallowed for that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It just didn't allow for this experiential integration. Because the spiritual, I was just listening to something here today, and it's this idea of our SQ, our spiritual quotient, is made up of this movement between awareness and integration. So if there's so much emphasis on only, knowing through systems of belief, knowing through the gaining of knowledge, and there's no experiential sharing that allows for this movement of integration into, it's like the difference. I tell people this is the difference between reading about love making and actually making love. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's the complete indifference between the two.
Well, even what we call intelligence, right? So, back in the day, and I think we still do this in education. We say, well, somebody's smart if they get good grades. But, in order to get good grades, you don't actually need to be smart.
No.
You just need to remember information.
Exactly.
But now we have smartphones
Yeah.
that can store information
For you.
That's why we call them smartphones, right? But they're not,
Exactly.
it's not intelligence, right? Because the ability, the human brain's ability to retain information is very, very limited. And if we're basing intelligence based upon how much
The
facts and
mind.
figures and knowledge we can
Exactly.
store into this thing, this is not intelligence.
No.
But there's an intelligence that comes from literally like being itself, right?
Yes.
But you only tap into that infinite. I always tell people, look, if you want to know everything, it's possible. But in order to know everything, you literally have to identify with everything you don't know.
Right.
Which is infinite in nature, right? Because what
Absolutely.
you don't know is infinite.
Right.
What I do know is like minuscule.
Myopic. Exactly.
So when I say what I know, I mean, I'm talking about information, right? I'm not talking about true knowledge. True knowledge does not require information. And that's where people get to know something. You don't need knowledge. You need experience.
Yes.
And you can actually experience the entire universe.
Yeah.
The entire cosmos. We have the ability to experience everything.
Yeah.
But you cannot experience that through the mind.
No.
And that's the biggest challenge for people.
It's that movement between the heart and the mind, really. The masculine and the feminine as well. I mean, that's a huge thing. That was, I think there was in the constructs of our religion, there was this hyper emphasis on the one at the expense of the other. So there just was this incongruence and imbalance in it all.
Totally. And these, when we think of masculine or feminine as concepts, then we can get hung up on that. But there's an experiential reality, right? We all have
absolutely
these dimensions of masculine, feminine within our being. And you can actually experience that versus get attached to a concept of masculine, feminine, what that means. And obviously that's a whole other subject.
Right.
But so you've been down this road, and this has been a tremendous journey for you. And this may be a difficult question, but if you were to, based upon where you are in your awareness now, if someone says, well, Aly, how do you understand the divine? How do you understand God? We know what your understanding of God was as an evangelical Christian, right? Way back in the day, it was this authoritarian kind of figure who was all powerful and kind of separate from us in the sky somewhere. But how do you understand God now? What is your understanding of the divine? How would you even talk about that?
That's good. I would say that, in my prayer meditations times, I spend most of the portion of it with this is my little tattoo here. It says letting God. So let God. So this idea of surrender into isness. And I am this idea of the I amness, the isness, and the space that's created. There's this one years ago, I thought it was Bonaventure that said it, but then I did some research recently and he's not who said it, but it's this idea of God being the vastness of God being like a sphere but without form, whose center is nowhere and whose circumference is everywhere.
Well, that's a statement right there.
And the fact that that is within me. My son-in-law posted in our family page a photo of space and of these different, let me see if I can bring it up and pull it up on the, because I was blown away. I posted it on my Facebook page. You can see it where it shows a nebula in space and then an eye. And then it shows the death of a star and the birth of a cell in the middle.
The same pictures.
And then it shows the universe. And then it shows one of our brain cells. One. Now, is that just coincidental? That right there is a picture representation of the vastness that is God, in my view.
Totally.
And that is within us.
Yes. And in the East, there's a statement that says, as is the atom, so is the universe, as is the micro,
Yes.
so is the macro. So it's all following the same pattern, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
This patterned way of reality. So, and more, I'm so much more okay with not needing to define
Mhm.
who or what God is. It's my experience. It's God experiencing God's self in and through me, in and through the density of my being, the form of my being, the universe of my being. I don't need necessarily to have these perfect definitions or edges that are systems of belief that define the exactness of God. I feel like I experience God internally. I would say God is within me. I've become more present to that more than anything. Our religion taught us this idea of separateness. God is out there, up there, somewhere, separate. And my grasping and trying hard and following all the rules and praying all the time and doing good social justice work and all that we're taught to do in our religions that implicate that we are finding or we are trying to get close to. But when you awaken to I am, Jesus said that, and they were offended by it. When Moses came upon the burning bush, whether you believe it literally or metaphorically, it doesn't matter. It's profound. Well, who shall I say is going to send me? Me, this person in form. I am. Yeah. Say that I am.
What's interesting is that whatever we may think we are, I may say, well, my name's Jamal, right? And I have this body here.
Yes.
I could say I'm a life coach. I could say I'm a podcaster.
I'm a wife. I'm a husband.
Author. I'm a husband, brother.
Yep. I'm a dad.
Son. I like to do this little exercise at the end of the day. I sometimes tell people in my coaching work, we'll say, hey, if you think you're all these things, let's just first of all, look at them. Number one, they're all temporary. There's a beginning to those and there's an end to those, but we can experience what that's like to put them away. So before you go to bed, I would say, let's just, before you go to bed, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just take off like jewelry, take off our clothes, put our pajamas on or whatever. And we'll just kind of lay in bed. It's like, let's just picture taking off all these identities, so I'll say, okay, well, my name is Jamal. Well, let me just picture that as something I can take off and put it to the side, like on a nightstand. My name is Jamal. Put my name to the side. I'm a male. Let me put that to the side.
Yeah.
I'm an American. Let me put that to the side. I'm whatever label you could say. I'm a Christian. I'm a whatever. Let's put that to the side. And then eventually you'll get to a place where you can't put anything else to the side.
I love that.
You're left with nothing.
Yes.
And then you can actually tangibly experience just briefly, for a few minutes through the breath in that moment with your eyes closed and everything to the side. All that's left that you can describe of yourself is simply, I am.
Yes.
This is me. I am. And it's a letting go. I love how you said that. It's not actually through the attachment to an idea of yourself. It's actually a letting go of who you think you are, that you actually experience this. I'm just am, just me, just being. And I think that's what Jesus meant when he said, if you want to find your life, you have to lose it.
Yes.
Because what we're actually losing is not our life. It's the idea of our life, the concept of who
the forms. Yep. The form.
And that's when you find the vastness or totality of all that you are, which is everything.
Yes. Absolutely. And even when you listen to like near-death experiences, which I do frequently, there's been many I've listened to that they get a sense immediately coming out of the body, out of the form, this avatar that we possess for, what is it right now on average? I think it's around 80 years, give or take, depending on, they come out of this vehicle, Paul called it in the Bible, a tent, and at some point in their movement, I mean, sometimes it can be very quickly through the vastness of space. They come face to face with some essence, some vast essence or whatever. But, whether they choose to come back into the body, they're told sometimes. I mean, it varies, but there's been many that I've listened to that have said they get back to the body, whether it's in a hospital room or it's on a street, in a car still, or in an ambulance or whatever. And they realize, how the heck am I going to get back into that avatar, that form, that the form of it, the density of it, the smallness of it. They've become very present to the vastness of all that they are in ways that they before that had never understood or known.
Because they're so body identified. Yeah.
They're so identified. So we've become, and our tradition has taught us this, has clung to the body.
Oh, totally.
In such unhealthy ways, in my opinion.
Totally.
But they get back and they're still out of the body, floating above it, looking down, like, how on earth am I going to get back into that? Just in discovering who they and what they are.
Yeah, totally. I remember hearing a near-death experience with this guy who literally, when he was looking at his body laying on this bed, he said, how am I supposed to fit into that?
Yes.
And
into that.
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, it is amazing when you think about the truest essence of who we are. We're given lip service in the Christian tradition. We're saying, oh, we're spiritual beings, right? We're having a human experience. We're spiritual beings. But that is not really understood, because when we say we're spiritual beings, what are we saying by the word? And the word spiritual has such baggage, right? Because of the religious connotation. But my understanding of the word spiritual just means beyond the physical. So if I am a spiritual being, then that means I have no borders, right? Because spirit has no borders,
right?
We're spiritual means there's no form. That's not like, in order, if we have a border, it's like, I'm here, but I'm not here. But when you take away the borders, that's infinite.
Yes. And that's why I love that definition, where it's God is he's such a vastness that his center is nowhere and his circumference is everywhere. So, it's that idea. Now, does form matter? I mean, we're here,
sure.
In our tradition, we say, we love that Emmanuel with us, God came in form. That's, whether you believe that literally or metaphor, again, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's God, is God, could God, this is what I've been postulating over many years now. Is God experiencing God's self in and through 8 billion people on the planet? We're at 8 billion now. Why was that necessary? If that's true, if there's any truth to that at all, or if you even entertain the possibility, why is that so?
Well, if true knowledge is experiential,
yes,
then in order for whatever we refer to God, people say God is all knowing, this infinite being of all knowingness. Well, there's only one way that you can actually be all knowing, and that is through infinite experience, which does require, this is the beauty of, I like to always, tell people in the coaching work we do, is the first things that we do is we start the process of going beyond the body mind identification. Yeah. And that is so huge, because all of our suffering and amnesia as a being is coming from body mind identification. Yes. So it's not like it's not because the body's bad, but it's just because if you can let go of your identification from the body, it actually gives you more access to the whole purpose of why your body exists, which is to give you an experience. Yes. But it's like a car, right? Like, I'm not confused about who I am. Like, I don't look in the driveway and go, that's me. That's my car. Right. It's not me. Right. But the car is a great tool. It gets me
to get you from point A to point B.
Point A to point B. And there's an experience in that. And the body, in many ways, it's probably not the best analogy.
But it's a vehicle
it's a vehicle. Yes. And that vehicle can be maximized to the degree that we understand what we are and what we're not.
Yes, absolutely. And that's allowing us to experience, love making, food, a beautiful day on a walk, pain and suffering and all those things that, allow us to grow and have these lessons of learning on this plane.
Totally.
It's allowing for that.
And that's, to me, why aging is such a gift, right? Because we're all aging, right?
Yes.
And I love it because it is the shattering of the illusion.
It is, totally. That's such a amazing way to look at it. I've loved, actually. I mean, obviously, most people would be like, well, it'd be nice to look like I'm 29 or 39, even for the rest of my life. But in terms of how in my beingness, I've loved it. I've just loved getting older.
Totally. I mean, can you imagine, like, the only reason that I think our culture deifies youth, and when I say youth, I'm talking about the certain image of the body, is because we're terrified of so when the body changes, because we're identified with it, we think we're changing. It's like, no, actually, this is just, I don't want to devalue it to the point of, like, some people call it a meat suit, or it's just it's a living, it's an amazing technology. To me, it's an incredibly well-designed piece of technology. But it's aging, because we were so identified with it, aging is almost, we're the only species that is aware of this process of aging and death. And that's because we're a conscious species. And to me, it's not just this inconvenient truth of being human that we know our body's temporary, to me is actually an essential part of our humanity.
Yes.
To know this is temporary. Your physical body is temporary. And that allows us to then come awake to this dimension of being.
Yes.
Which is ultimate reality, which is who we are. And to say, oh yeah, that ultimate nature of who I am. I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. Well,
exactly. Who am I?
I am.
And then going on that search. I mean, that question, I cannot stress enough. Like, in our tradition, that was poo-pooed a lot. It really was. I mean, to be you would be shamed. Why are you reading self-help books? Why are you whatever? But, in thinking through that, I think, Jesus, I think it's somewhere in the New Testament where the disciples are implicating the law, that referring to Moses's law, the 10 Commandments, whatever. And Jesus just simplifies it, like, love God, follow your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love others as you love yourself. And in our tradition, I feel like we've left that out so much. There's been so much stigma and shaming around that portion. You're only going to love others to the degree that you know that you've searched out the I am within you and have understood that.
Self is the reference point, right?
Yes.
And that's where people,
self is where God lives.
Yes, totally. That's the whole message. Love one another as self, not like yourself, but as yourself.
Yes.
So that means self-awareness, consciousness, just being aware of the self. You will not find God outside of the self.
No.
And you cannot love apart from inclusion into the self.
Absolutely.
That's what we do when we love. We're just saying, hey, I include you.
Yes.
Into myself, as myself.
And I'm sharing myself with you, which is the work of integration, to share the love of God, to share that with one another. I mean, to mirror that back to one another. But that was something I felt like in our tradition had gone missing. So the movement for me in understanding the vastness of God has been an involution as much as it's been an evolution. It's going inward. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Within you. And if you think about, when I think about motherhood, that's what I think of, because to me, the idea of being a mother, and again, I know I'm speaking as a male here, but the idea of a mother is containment, right? It's you're basically, a mother is the ground of being, right? That's why we refer in indigenous peoples would always refer to the earth all over the world as mother, because what does the earth do? Contains.
Absolutely.
Right? Contains.
Grounds.
So the circumference of everything is this ground of being that includes and contains. And there's a statement I make in there's a practice that I do every day, and it says, today I'm a mother to the world.
I love that.
meaning I am the ground of being that just allows and accepts, and
Yes.
everything fits in my border,
Yes.
the border of who I am,
Yes.
which is infinite,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
allows me to be a mother. And it's the energy of motherhood that brings peace, that brings containment to this world. And that's in, by the way, something that you personally embody so well, is
Oh, thank you.
that energy of motherhood. And I know everybody that knows you would say that,
Mm.
but you do embody that, because there's a containment. One of the things that you do well, probably because of your own story, is you include others into your own being.
I feel
So
like I've gotten better at that. I mean, that honestly, a big part of my deconditioning has been to allow for that more and more, to expand the womb, the creatrix womb force of the feminine,
mhm,
to allow and include, in our tradition that it was not so inclusive. We were taught, we were conditioned, we really were conditioned.
mhm,
It's certain types of people, certain
right.
context, certain people, they need to believe this way,
Mhm.
so I feel like I've gotten better as I've continued to decondition, not even just at the tribal level with my religion, but I would say in my politics is another area where I think I
Sure.
had become very tribal, so putting that all on the table, allowing for opening up, allowing for this input, this expansion.
And to be the container for all of it, which
Yeah.
is it gets rid of dualism. It just allows for being, for just letting
Yes.
go, and that's the ultimate way, I think, to be. Is you don't have to be, you just let go, and then you are. That's how you
Yes.
be. It's
Yes.
that opening your hands and letting go, and of all the concepts and ideas and beliefs. And well, Aly, I want to, first of all, thank you for sharing a bit of your journey with us. There's so much more, obviously, to, I mean, how do you boil years of this discovery down into a 45-minute hour conversation?
Yeah.
But we're gonna, I just wanted people to get a little taste and of where you're coming from and your perspective. And as we've talked about, and this is something I'm excited about for this podcast moving forward, one of the things that Aly and I are going to be talking about each month on these shows is we're going to start with a series of very practical. I think this is going to be really, I know that some of the things that we talked about today can seem to some maybe as being very
Esoteric.
esoteric and metaphysical or
Yeah.
whatever, but there's a real practical nature to some of these things. And ultimately our life, whatever you call your life and your experience of life on a daily basis, is simply energy. And your experience of life is going to be experienced to the degree that you are either retaining or losing energy on a
Energy.
day in, day out basis.
Right.
So it's just like if you were bleeding, right? If you were if you had a cut in your artery and you're gushing out blood and you're hemorrhaging, you would not be able to function very well for very long, because you're losing your vital life supply, which is your blood,
Right.
right? But in the same is true in energy. If you're hemorrhaging energy on a daily basis, you're suffering, you're struggling, you're not living at your most optimal level in life. And so one of the things that people really need, and this is obviously what we work on in coaching a lot, is to stop. There's certain things we're oftentimes we're wired to go against the grain of how life works, and because of that we're in resistance, and whenever we're in resistance we're hemorrhaging energy. So
Yes.
one of the things we learn quickly is to stop doing that. But we're going to talk, you and I, and we talked about this, there's actually 7 specific ways that we as human beings, with maybe unconsciously, are hemorrhaging energy on a day in and day out basis. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really excited. These 7 things deserve some attention. And Aly, you brought them to my attention. And I thought it would be really good. And we
Unpack
talked
them.
about this, to unpack them here on the show.
Yeah.
These 7 things. So we're going to take two of these 7 things each month, and we're going to unpack them for the listeners and just have a conversation
Around them.
around these things that are draining our energy, for the purpose of awareness, so that we can retain, not hemorrhage our
Yes.
vital life energy on a day in and
Yes.
day out basis. So I'm excited about this
I
conversation
love that.
coming
Me
up.
too. I'm so excited
Yeah,
about this. Thank
me
you.
too. Absolutely. So we'll be, we'll have you back on next month, and
Yep.
we'll dive right into these 7. We'll get into the first 2 and talk more about those, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Yes,
much for letting me share some about my life and my history, my
of
evolution and
course.
involution.
Yes, and thank you for offering yourself and for being open and making yourself accessible to the world. It's really important.
Yes. Yes, totally. Sharing. Vulnerability is so huge in my practice, just being vulnerable with people. And I love the dynamism of a conversation, and nobody does conversation like you. I
Well,
love my conversations with you.
thank you. Likewise, me as well. I love the conversations with you as well, and I'm excited to move forward with them on the show.
Me
And
too.
always look forward to the comments from the listeners. If you guys have any questions or maybe something that you've heard and sparked some further
Interest.
dialogue, interest, please feel
Yes.
free to let me know. If you haven't, just as I've mentioned on the show before, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, let me encourage you to do that. You can go to iTunes or Spotify. You can hit subscribe. You can just rate us and review
Review.
us. It helps the show get visibility. And
Yes.
yeah, we always love to hear from the listeners. So until next time, guys, thank you so much. And Aly, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.